Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. Hope everybody is doing well today. See some folks joining on here and commenting. Glad to see you this morning, Lyle and Sheila. Hope that you all are having a good day, and we've got more people that keep joining on. All right. So we had an interesting occurrence yesterday. I have never had this happen before. I've had other things happen while I was doing a live stream that were my fault. I didn't click a certain button or something was messed up on my audio, but I was going on yesterday, and about the 35-minute mark, my audio just cut out. In fact, my wife texted me as I was live and said, no sound. Well, I didn't know that. And then some comments started coming up saying no sound. And I don't know, everything was bouncing fine on my end. My sound equipment, my streaming program that I use on my computer, everything was working fine, so I don't know what happened there, but we got cut off. And so I ended up uploading that video to YouTube and then adding a 5-minute video onto the YouTube channel. And I don't know, it was weird. So I kind of want to go back to some things I was talking about yesterday at the end. So we were talking about Christianity and politics, and I've got the PowerPoint up here today, but I'm not going to spend much time on that because we covered it all yesterday until we got cut off. So again, there are varying views among Christians about political involvement. Again, as I have up here, some say you shouldn't be involved at all as a Christian. Some say it's okay to vote, but you shouldn't be too involved. And then you have some who believe you should be, as a Christian, a political activist. So, and again, a political activist is somebody who, this is what they live for. They're involved in everything political. There's got to be some middle ground in there somewhere. I really believe, and this is just my conviction, I think that a Christian's involvement in politics is a Romans 14 issue. In other words, it's like Paul says in Romans 14:22. If you have a conviction about something, keep it to yourself and God. I personally believe that a Christian should be involved in the political process. We have the ability and the opportunity to do so, to have some type of influence in our country, and so take it. Why not? But I'm not going to tell another Christian, you have to do this. And I'm not going to listen to another Christian who says, well, you can't do that or you're wrong. That's just, there's no biblical precedent to say anything like that. And my basis for saying that is this screen right here. John the Baptizer talked about it. Jesus talked about it. Paul and Peter talked about it. You read throughout the book of Acts, Paul was very much involved in a knowledge of the law, Roman law, because he was a Roman citizen, but also in using that law to his advantage and to help him further the gospel. So that's what we were talking about yesterday, like I said, and I was just I'm looking here on my phone through what happened yesterday, and we had around 50 or so comments, and then things got cut off. So one of the things I was talking about is the fact that, when you look at politics, there are so many different policies that are involved, and it's kind of mind-boggling to think about all the different subjects and issues that are covered in politics. Some that, frankly, I'm of the opinion that government has no business being involved in certain aspects of our life, but the longer any society, the longer any country goes, it seems that government gets bigger, more bloated, more involved, and more controlling. I mean, that's just the history, that's just the reality of history in politics. So, some of those policies are indifferent to our faith. What do I mean by that? Well, some things that are put forward as policy, they don't affect me as a Christian. They don't affect society in general in either a negative or positive way. I think that there's plenty of room to have an open discussion or an open debate on policy. Nothing wrong with that. I think one of the problems, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, is the fact that for so long we've been told we can't talk about politics and religion. Therefore, we don't know how to talk about politics and religion. And that's a problem. When I look, for instance, at Acts chapter 17, and this is just an example of talking about religion, Paul had an open dialogue with people, and with people who disagreed with him, all right? People that he came from their background. They were Jews. He came from a Jewish background, and they had a dialogue. They had a back and forth. We need to be able to do that. But the sad reality is we live in a culture, or we live in a time where culture, if you disagree with somebody and they have some type of platform, and this is particularly prevalent on social media. If you express something that offends somebody or that disagrees or contradicts what somebody else believes, instead of discussing it, their solution is, well, I'll just block you. I'll cancel you. We live in cancel culture. That's just a reality, and that's not a good thing, especially for Christians. So we have to be able to talk about things. Some policies are indifferent to our faith. Some are not, okay? Period. And so a couple of things I said yesterday. Christians ought to be deeper thinkers so they can see beyond the platitudes of politicians. And what I was saying about that is, okay, so last week we had the DNC, this week we have the RNC, and those things are designed to go after the base of each party, to as they say in the media, to gin up the base. That's their goal. They're going to do very little persuading of what's called the those who are in the middle, the moderates of either the right or the left. And all this is political language. But Christians, I would say above all people, should be deeper thinkers so they can see beyond the silly, overused cliches, platitudes, however you want to see it, of politics. We ought to be deeper than to say, and so this is one that I addressed a little bit yesterday, God is in control anyway, so it doesn't matter how I vote. Again, I'm of the persuasion that if I'm going to live in this society, and I want society to be just and equitable, then God needs to be involved in it, and therefore the Christian needs to be involved in it. But there are some Christians who just say, well, God's in control and it doesn't matter how I vote. Well, that's a false sense of security, okay? That's like that would almost be like saying, well, I obeyed the gospel a long time ago. God's in control. It doesn't matter how I live. That's really saying the same thing, and I don't know any Christian that would say that. So my solution to the idea is, well, that God's in control anyway and it doesn't matter how I vote. Read 1 Samuel chapter 8. I said that yesterday. That was exactly Israel's mindset. You had a prophet of God, Samuel, saying, don't do this. And they refused to hear him. And what was God's answer? Let them have a king. You tell them what it's going to be like, but you give them what they ask for. So for Christians who take that attitude of God's in control anyway and it doesn't matter how I vote, read 1 Samuel chapter 8 and then come back to me and we can have a discussion. Another thing that I would like to talk about that I didn't get around to yesterday is the idea that the government is not the church. I'm really amazed by this concept, and I didn't get to this at all yesterday. Government is not the church. I'm so amazed. That's not the right word. Bewildered, perplexed, I don't know what the right word is, by Christians who have this concept that, when we elect our officials, they need to be like, these people, I can't believe that they're not Sunday school teachers. It's almost like they have this concept that when they vote or support a politician, that politician is above mistake, above any reproach. And I'll just give you two examples. Okay, last week the DNC, Barack and Michelle Obama. I saw Christians on Facebook. In fact, I tell you this. I saw one Christian say, that woman is my idol. Think about that statement. That woman is my idol. You're aiming pretty low. But you know what? We're going to see the exact same thing this week with the Republican National Convention. Donald Trump can do no wrong. The Republicans can do no wrong. So it's kind of like trouble in marriage sometimes. There's his side, there's her side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. I mean, this is how we do politics sometimes. People are so sold on this idea that they have this favorite politician and he's just or she's just above reproach and they're perfect and they're everything they have to be. And Christians sometimes adopt that mentality and they feel like that whoever they support or campaign for, vote for, whatever, it's almost like they're just a perfect Christian. I mean, wake up. That's not reality. These people are anything but that. So I'm amazed when I see this type of attitude that when government doesn't do what we think it should do, okay, what the Christian thinks it should do, Christians are just stunned and they can't believe that a politician would do such a thing. I mean, God put them there. Why would they do such? You need to wake up. You need to live in reality. There's politics is an ugly ball game. Anyway, so what I was talking about yesterday when things got cut off was the issue of abortion. Okay? Again, so going back to this idea that there are some topics or some policies that are indifferent to the Christian faith, some political things, some policies. However, the fact of the matter is there are other policies that cannot be indifferent, that we cannot be indifferent towards. I talked a bit about the fact that we have a two-party system. You have two parties, and they each they've each got their own platform, and it all comes out in times like this. We're in an election cycle, and really, it seems like, okay, so the president of the United States is sworn into the office in January, following the November election. And it seems like the day after the president, whoever it is, whatever party, I mean, this just seems to be the norm. Whenever that president is sworn into office, the campaign for the next 4 years starts. It's beyond now the concept of governing. It's, well, we need to get ready for the next election. How about you do your job? If you can't see this as about power and control, then you're kind of walking around with your eyes closed. I mean, we can't be naive. That's one thing that drives me crazy is the naivete that some people have about politics. Anyway, when it comes down to it, I said yesterday, and I'm going to correct myself. I said two issues that are not indifferent to our faith: abortion and the LGBTQA plus movement. I'm going to add a third one to that because I thought about that a little bit. I'm going to throw environmentalism in there. And the reason I'm going to throw that one in there, now listen, everybody wants clean air and clean water, and we know the talking points of politicians. The Republicans say, well, the Democrats want to take away your rights and all of this stuff because they're trying to save the environment. The Democrats say of the Republicans, well, they don't care about science. I mean, they all have their talking points. I get that, and I think we all get that. But the fact of the matter is, our culture has turned the environmental issue into a god, into something that's worshipped. We're always told how such a threat that, this world, and what was it, Greta Thunberg a couple years ago before the United Nations, we've got 12 years, maybe that was, I don't know. Anyway, somebody says we have 12 years before things just, get terrible. You have policies that are put out there that are going to affect a lot of people negatively, all in an effort to supposedly save the environment. Romans chapter 1 talks about those who worship and serve the created thing rather than the one who created the thing. They're worshiping the wrong things. And in reality, when you break it down, when it gets down to it, they are worshiping themselves. So I'm going to say that type of radical environmentalism is a god that people have created for themselves. But then you have the two issues that are always prominent. Again, what used to be just talked about as homosexuality, it's morphed into the LGB community, then to the LGBTQ community, and then the LGBTQA plus. I mean, like I said yesterday, the acronym just keeps getting longer. Things keep getting added to it. These things are not indifferent to the Christian's faith. That's why we need to inform ourselves if, I mean, that's a significant term. If we're going to involve ourselves in the political process, we need to know about these things. We shouldn't be blind, as people often talk about in the political discourse, sheep. In other words, I'm a Republican because I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat because I'm a Democrat. A Christian, that is so shallow and so weak-minded. Inform yourselves. Again, if you're going to involve yourself in the political process, and once again, I believe that's a Romans 14 issue, but if you are, know what you're doing, know what you're talking about. And don't be, especially if you're a Christian, don't be the type of person who, if somebody disagrees with you, you're gonna cancel them, you're gonna block them, you're gonna try to call them out. Be willing to, have enough spine in you to have a discourse, have a conversation about it. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. It's just easier to hit the block button. All right, so let's talk about these two issues real quick. So let's start out. I'm going to start out in Romans chapter 1, because again, this is a major talking point for one of our, and like I said yesterday, this had been mainly for one of our two major political parties in the United States of America. This is just the reality of it. And that is discussed here in Romans chapter 1. Now, it's finding its way into both political parties, because that's the nature of the world. And see, that's the thing. The church is not the world is not the church. And it should never be. So why should the church be surprised when the world does the things it does? I don't know, but sometimes we find ourselves surprised. Okay, so I'm going to start reading in Romans chapter 1 and verse 24. Yeah. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie. And here's that phrase I used earlier. And worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. And a lot of policies do that. I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. For this reason, now here's the thing, verse 26. So this goes back to that mindset of, well, it doesn't matter how I vote. It doesn't matter if I'm involved in the political process. God's in control anyway. I understand God's in control. But listen to what Romans 1 and verse 26 says. For this reason, God gave them up. God will let us go the way that we choose to go. If we choose to support things that are ungodly, like what Paul's getting ready to talk about here, guess what God's going to allow us to do? He's going to let us go that way. God gave them up to vile passions, for even the women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Notice that language. Likewise also the men, listen to this language, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one for another, men with men committing that which is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error, which was due. That is pretty hard to misunderstand what's being talked about there. Now, like I said, in our current culture, for a while, that was pretty much a one-party issue. The Democrat Party was always on that side of the issue. We even had movements several years ago. You could get T-shirts and bumper stickers of a little image of a man and a woman. This plus this equals marriage. Well, now the fact of the matter is both political parties are trying to cater to that, to that category of voters, all right? We see that. We can't be indifferent to that. But at the same time, we understand that's the nature of the world. I go back to Genesis chapter 6. Why did God bring the flood upon the earth? Because every thought of man's heart was only evil continually. So we shouldn't be surprised. All right. But then the other issue that always comes to my mind that's not indifferent to our faith, that's involved in the political process, is that of abortion. And what is abortion? So I actually went to a seminar a few years ago when I was preaching in Pensacola, and I've got the paperwork somewhere. I didn't look for it, but if you want to learn more about that subject, just search the type of procedures that are done. Okay, just for instance, do a Google search on a dilation and curettage. Do a Google search on dilation and evacuation. Do a Google search on third trimester abortion. And then tell me that's not indifferent to your faith. And the fact of the matter is, when we look at our political landscape in the United States of America, we have a two-party system. One party is for that. One party is against that. There's just no other way to say it. There is no other way to say it. You do a Google search. I tell you a video to watch. I was exposed to this video a long time ago, actually back in the 90s, called The Silent Scream. If you've never watched the Silent Scream video, you need to watch it. Narrated by a former abortion doctor. how any Christian could throw his or her support behind a candidate without knowing their stance on abortion is inexcusable. It's beyond me. All right? Yes, I know that God is in control. Believe me, I know that. But I also know that just as much as God is in control, God will let us go the way that we want to go. He's not going to fight our free will. He's not going to, as we say, He's not going to hold a gun to your head and make you do what's right. He never has, and He never will. We need to know what we're talking about. We need to know what we're thinking and what we're supporting, because that's just it. You are putting your support, you're putting your name, you're putting your stamp of approval by that person. You better think about it. All right, so here's a couple of... So I want to go back. I didn't have a chance to do this yesterday, and I apologize. Like I said, we had around 50 comments yesterday or so on this particular subject. So I want to go back and just address a couple of things that were stated. Let me see here. Yeah, so one person said yesterday, and I liked this comment. I didn't see it till afterwards. We have a couple of generations that can't talk about anything. And man, that's exactly right. I've experienced it, and I'm sure some of you have experienced that too. Another person commented, our country has gotten away from punishing the wrongdoer. Sure, there's no question about that. But you know, that's nothing new. You think of Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 20? Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put sweet for bitter and bitter for sweet. This is nothing new. I mean, that was written 2,800 years ago. So again, there's very little that surprises me as a Christian. And that's the thing. If you know the Bible, if you know the Word of God, and you see history play out throughout the biblical text, there's really not much that's going to surprise you these days. Because it's like Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. Another person said this, I don't vote party, I vote for who is close to my values, and I won't vote for anyone who is for abortion, period. I think that's a good call. And the way I say it, the way I believe is, I'm going to vote for who will kill the fewest babies in this country, because that's an issue. And it's interesting to note how the language is always cleaned up by the media, particularly by the media and by politicians. They won't talk about the procedures. They won't talk about a D&C. They won't talk about a D&E. They won't talk about a partial birth abortion where everything but the baby's head is delivered and they sever the spinal cord in the birth canal. They frame it as women's health care. They frame it as reproductive rights. Do you know why they frame it that way? Because it sounds better. It's not as offensive. It won't turn people off when you say women's health care or reproductive rights. When you hear those phrases, you can be 100% certain they're talking about abortion. They've changed the language. And see, that's another thing about politics. They have their own dictionary, and you have to be very careful. Okay, so one person commented yesterday, if you don't vote, don't complain about what you get in Washington. But that's the easy thing to do. It's easy to sit back and what we call Monday morning quarterback when you're not involved in the process, when you don't have any skin in the game. You don't take any risk. It's easy to just sit back and question everything that's done. How about if you're not going to be involved, just keep your mouth shut? You have nothing to contribute. One person commented this, I do feel that God expects us to educate ourselves the best that we can, so that we can stand up for what is good and right. There are so many that approve of abortion, homosexuality, etc. And then the comments started coming in, lost sound. And I didn't see that yesterday till it was too late, so I apologize for that. So one commenter on here today just commented, God is in control. He blesses us with a brain and a guide. The rest is up to us. Yeah, it's amazing how people will attempt to justify their behavior, their belief system, and things like that. Well, God's in control, as if that makes everything okay. Again, read 1 Samuel chapter 8. Do you know why you should read 1 Samuel chapter 8? Because God was in control. And Samuel was the prophet, and Samuel warned the people, listen, don't do this. And God said, no, Samuel, they asked for it, give it to them. So, in fact, even in let me turn back there to 1 Samuel chapter 8. I write these little notes in the margin of my Bible that make sense to me. If somebody were to pick up my Bible and see it, they probably wouldn't know what in the world I was talking about. But here's a comment I have in 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 10. It says, so Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And I wrote out to the side, be careful what you ask for. And I think a lot of American Christians in particular would be good. It would be good for them to heed that advice. You need to be careful what you ask for. And that goes both ways. Just keep in mind what I've said here. Some policies, it doesn't matter either way. We can debate about it. We can disagree about it, and it would be fine. It doesn't matter. We can disagree on taxation. We could disagree disagree and debate on the government's role in public education. All that kind of stuff. We can talk about that, and it won't affect our faith, our salvation. But when you talk about other issues, when we're talking about the preservation of innocent life, and not just innocent life, but life within the womb, there is no room for disagreement on that. Period. God hates hands that shed innocent blood. I think I read that in a book somewhere. You better know who you're putting your name by. You better know who you're giving your stamp of approval to. Couple more comments here. It's like social distancing. Give it a cute or fun to say name, and everyone is all about it. Yeah, I'm getting tired of hearing about. I've been tired of social distancing for some time now. Another person comments, I will always uphold what God has said about any of these issues. Anything that our government does outside of the doctrine of Christ, I will vote against it. I mean, that's the logical step or the logical position that a Christian should take. If it contradicts the Bible, I won't do it. I won't support it. But here's the problem. When we talk about politics and religion, people don't think logically. They think emotionally. They're emotionally tied to us. So think about it religiously, all right? Just for a minute, then we'll wrap it up. People are emotionally tied to a certain religious practice. Maybe they were raised a certain way, raised in a certain faith, and so they're emotionally tied to that. Well, my grandparents were this, my parents were this, and they can't be wrong. I just know that my parents will be in heaven. That's an emotional reaction, not based on reality or Scripture. People do the exact same thing with politics. You can throw common sense out the window, because when you get that emotional connection, then you're not going to be persuaded by any logical argument. And sadly, that's the state of many religiously and politically. It's like I've heard the statement before that a lot of people's minds are like concrete. It's thoroughly mixed up and permanently set. We can't be like that. Particularly, and mainly, I would say, in the religious context. We have to be willing to be taught. Not every one of us, we're not all right 100% of the time. We can be wrong, believe it or not. And the fact of the matter is, I think as humans, we don't like to admit that we're wrong. But that is true. We have to be open-minded, and when we develop an emotional attachment to our belief system, again, whether political or religious, most of the time we're closed off to reality. We're closed off to the truth. That's a dangerous place to be. All right, so hey, guess what, guys? We didn't lose sound today. I'm going to wrap this up. I appreciate all of you who have been on here the last couple of days talking about politics. I know it's a touchy subject, but a lot of things are touchy. And we can't be afraid to hit them head on. And we need to know what the Bible says about them. So thanks for being on here the last couple of days and all your good questions and comments. And if you have anything further after this live stream is over, feel free to add it in here to the comment section, or you can send me a private message on Facebook. Thank you, Miss Barbara. Appreciate that, and hope you are doing well. Okay, so there are a couple of different things, a couple of different topics I've been working on for myself based on a list of questions and requests for studies that people have given me for this live stream. This is something I do every day, And it's part of my work here at Mammoth Spring, but it goes out live over the internet and then onto our YouTube channel. Secondly, if you have any suggested topics or things you would like to study, either from the biblical text straight, or a topical subject related to the Bible, let me know, and I'll be happy to consider those and make note of things that people want to study. I think that's an important thing to do. All right, so thanks for being on here today, and I hope that you have a good day, and Lord willing, I will see you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Central Time.